new commercial model, revenue model. And as part of that pivot, he always found it difficult with the engineering team trying to either focus on the new strategy or just kind of like doing the usual running the business as it is today. And so we came with the idea of, okay, maybe we organize a roundtable if we bring the two perspectives together and see if that brings any value to the conversation, if it can help, let's say, engineering a product think differently about sales and sales think differently about engineering a product. And so here we are. Thank you again, Barry, for organizing. We have a really exciting panel. Just quickly for everyone's sake here, I'm the managing director of Novoda. Novoda, we are an agency. We build digital products, and I'm trying to figure out basically where we could add a bit more value by bringing new thinking to the work we provide to our customers. And so I'm really interested to hear opinions, how people think about those topics, and see where that takes us. Maybe if the panel here, we have 2 people from tech and 2 people from sales. Anyone wants to jump in first, give a quick 30 seconds of introduction? I see Mal, maybe you can start.
Okay, yeah. It's always tricky when you ask who wants to start.
You get to send the ball.
So hi everyone. Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Barry. My name's Mal Minhas, and I have some experience of this tension between sales and engineering from my past. I've been a CTO and VP in tech companies for quite a long time. And I'm branching out into product as well now. So that's going to be part of the discussion today as well, the role of product in the mix. And I'm going to hand over to Sachin, I think.
Sure, thanks, Mal. Glad to be here. I'm Sachin Kachla. I'm currently a fractional CRO. I work with B2B SaaS companies in the startup scale-up stage, helping them with their revenue acceleration. My full-time career, I was building and running sales teams for fintech companies in the capital market space. But my path into sales was a little bit unusual because I actually came from product to general management and then into sales roles. So I've kind of been on both sides of the fence, but the majority of my career I've been in sales. And I guess I will nominate Dan to go next.
Hi, Dan Harker. I've been a CTO for pretty much as long as I can remember and have gone through the various stages of being a technologist, lead engineer, all the way up to proper 500,000 person organization CTO. And I've had to work with sales and product and go from being a founder with 3 people where everyone cares about everything, and done startups multiple times, and also gone up to the delivering value for organization and constantly wearing the how we build it, making sure that we're building the right thing hat, and making sure that we're not distracted by people's ideas and actually going after value that's ultimately driving for the business and being connected. And I've seen that tension between what engineers want to build and what engineers should build and what engineers do build, all being quite different, as well as what customers say they want and what customers actually want and what customers actually buy when you give them what they said they want. And that conversation has been quite interesting to me. I'll pass over to Charlie.
Very much. Hi, I'm Charlie Markham. I am a CTPO, so I kind of bridge the two areas of technology and product. I started my career, the first 10 years were in investment banks, working my way up. So I understand how enterprise and corporate works, but I found my real home in startup and scale-up businesses. So for the last decade or so, I've been CTOing and CTPOing in those kind of businesses. And so have experience of knowing what it takes to get to IPO, most notably with WeShop, who IPO'd at about 100 million. So been on that journey, and like Dan was saying, it's very much about finding product market fit and making sure that you're focused on delivering value rather than clever technology that may not actually find a home with customers. So yeah, that's me. And I'll hand over to Volker.
Hello, so I'm a fractional COO as well, also work as an executive and sales coach. So yeah, startup, scale up experience, enterprise sales experience, 20 years in it. So yeah, that's in terms of an introduction. And I think Carl, I don't know how you want to take it forward if I pitch the topic straight away, but I think you have some questions. So I'm curious.
You want to pitch a topic straight away? I have some stats if you want. I did a bit of research.
Okay, go ahead. Sounds good.
First of all, I was like, thank you for the panel. Really exciting to have all this different perspective. It's just like I did a bit of quick research as you do today with Perplexity rather than ChatGPT, but like it's more accurate responses. So I kind of like uploaded the topic. So like it can give me some stats around the subject and they link to actual papers and web pages is correct, but like 78%, Volker, this is maybe a session is for you too. Like 78% of salespeople believe they understand customer needs, while only 40% of customers agree. And then company with strong sales and engineering alignment experience 20% annual revenue growth compared to 4% decline in those with poor alignment. So I think it's like there's an interesting point here of aligning sales and engineering and then understanding customer needs as part of that setup, which I hope we'll cover in this hour. So maybe we'll start with value. So I have my papers running around. How do we align maybe like the perspective of value from sales and engineering and product? Maybe that could be an interesting point to start off with. Anyone has any thought on that?
I think you've said the word already, which is if you're trying to connect sales and engineering, then you need a product team. And the product team, generally, if you're doing it right, should be at the heart of the organization and connected to everybody. It should be connected to the sales team and listening and gathering insight and getting that insight to coalesce into potential features that then are prioritized as part of a roadmap and played back to a sales team so that they can validate it with customers as they go on their journeys and do demos and so forth. So the product team from that side are essential kind of counterparts for sales. And in our case, we send product team members out on sales calls and sales meetings. So they're deeply embedded on that side, but also then how do you align your engineers who don't really want to be customer facing for the most part? Actually, the product team need to be able to describe the user need and the problems that they face so the engineers can propose meaningful solutions. And then there's obviously the haggling the process that follows thereafter to say, okay, you want 10 scope, but actually we've got time for 5 scope. So what can we deliver in the first milestone that will validate that the user need is right and that is going to kind of satisfy the customer enough that we can then deliver the next 5 knowing that this is what they wanted. So from my perspective, it's all about having an effective product team.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. But I'd take a step back because it's not necessarily a product team because not every organization is structured in that way, but everyone is building a product of some form. I like to think of it like the what, why, and how. So the what is what the product is. What is the thing that we're building? And that's usually defined by a person who decides this is the thing that we're building. It could be owned by an entire product team, or maybe it's just a CEO who's got a vision and they're defining that thing. Then there is the why. Well, usually it's to make money, right? So this is where you get to sales and marketing. What was the why are we building this to make the company? And I don't mean why from a PMF point of view, although that's very much part of it. I mean internally, why? Because not all organizations need to make money. You have quangos, you have businesses, you have governmental organizations, but they definitely have a sales direction of what good looks like at the end of having done this, which isn't necessarily connected to the what, because we can run away with the what in imaginations. And so, but yes, usually it is a sales team in most commercial organizations that decides, well, if we build this, then we can make more money out of it. And then it's just down to the engineers to decide how. And that really comes last. And it's really easy to put that first. And getting everyone connected to the what and the why and then the how is really important. And usually splitting it up into that trio of sales and marketing, engineering, and of product helps. But quite often in organizations, you'll see both that you'll have a CPTO, for example, and those concerns still are separated. If you imagine that, you might say, we don't have managers here. Management still happens in your organization. It doesn't matter whether you have someone who owns product definition still happens in your organization, and how that happens and where that happens is really important to understand.
I think you're absolutely right. So, there's a question of roles rather than teams. So that's a really good point. And actually, the examples of where this is a kind of potentially a bit of a diversion, but if people know ITIL, the IT infrastructure library around essentially a support organization in technology, and they said, well, you need to have service management and incident management and change management and release management. And so, banks spun up teams for each of these silos. And it wasn't entirely effective because actually there's shared endeavors that need to happen. So if you split your organization up too granularly into different roles, actually you have this kind of ballooning of bureaucracy. So actually, where possible, identifying what roles people need to play, but not necessarily pigeonholing them to a single role, can be really effective in making sure that there's really good collaboration between those activities.
Great. And when you do that, you need to make sure that when I'm participating or when I'm engaging, which hat am I wearing? Because it's really easy to conflate the two together, especially if you're the CEO and there's 4 or 5 of you in the startup. Are you saying do this because you're the CEO? Or are you saying, well, I think we should do this and I'm looking for feedback? And your statement can easily be misinterpreted as the other role that you're not really trying to do. So communication is really important there. Yeah. Mal, you had your hand up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think it's very important to consider the organizational mechanisms in place, which I think, Dan, you were sort of alluding to. I think almost every company I've worked in has had a different C-team topology. So some have had the product and technology role combined. Some have had a separate COO that's running sales. Sometimes that's been driven through the CFO. There are kind of different C-team topologies, if you like, within different organizations, and that can impinge on the culture within the business. So I think that it's really important to establish, value centricity, what it means within the business from the very top down. So from the leadership level down, setting a really clear vision and then making sure that the sales-driven work that needs doing, and I'm mentioning that in a deliberate sense because I think we're going to get onto the topic of the more short-term, immediate types of work that often come up in that context, making sure that aligns with this longer-term vision and that it's clear how it fits in. And I think also what's useful as well is having some KPIs that you can review in a cross-functional format. And you make sure that all stakeholders across the business are able to see those KPIs, and that you've got that they cover product and business areas and aspects. So it was really just to kind of emphasize this kind of organizational aspect to the question.
Thank you, man. I see Vic, you have your hands up. If you don't mind, just.
Oh yeah, yeah, thank you. I just wanted to agree with Mel there, and I think you have to step back and look at the organization as a whole. The segment of the organization, I think Charlie alluded to that in terms of banking, and also the structure and the culture, the structure, the operating model, and if engineering and sales have the right seniority in the organization, if they have the seat on the table, the board, for example, if it's a CTO representing engineering or head of engineering and sales, head of sales, they have the same seniority because that can create different types of friction, etc. And something that Dan alluded to was comms. If head of sales, head of engineering get on well, even if it's a sales-led organization, even tech companies can be very, very sales-driven. And then you can reduce that friction. It's not going to go away entirely. You can have a product team, of course, but if head of engineering and head of sales don't talk, nothing's going to happen, right? Comms is a very, very important piece. But in summaries, the structure of the organization, and the culture, the operating model, and the segment, if you're a B2B company, B2C, B2B2C, etc., and the sector you operate in, that will have a huge bearing on how sales and engineering interact.
Thank you, Vic. I think we're kind of landing on like communication and measurement. Like, how do you do that better? Maybe if we touch on the on metrics, just a tiny bit. I'm curious as well to hear from maybe from a sales perspective here. But usually it's measured around revenue. Sales are kind of measured directly on revenue, while product and engineering are measured more on quality and innovation. Let's say in product innovation. How do you close that gap? How do you make sure that the metrics that you measure at least are aligned, so there's less tension between sales, which is more short-term monistic, like 3 to 6 months, while product is more long-term monistic, which is like 12 to 18 months. How can you close that gap?
I can jump in there. I mean, I've found it, you have kind of the primary drivers of KPIs for different people in different roles. And then what I've seen work to a degree is introducing kind of minor KPIs. So on the sales side, the major KPI will be revenue and contract value signed. But the minor KPIs may be more qualitative, like being a good team player, or your ability to hold your own in price negotiations, or how often the quality of contracts that you sign. Like, are you having to give exceptional clauses that makes the contract weak, like termination clauses and things like that. So on the sales side, I've introduced in the past those types of qualitative metrics that kind of improve the quality of the work that they're doing, and collaboration. And maybe on the product side, obviously there's features, there's delivery, and things that align with kind of pushing the company along the roadmap. But maybe on that side, I've seen the particularly those members who are client-facing sales engineers and product managers, that they get some revenue attributes as a minority of their KPIs as well, kind of aligned with company growth. So there's a bit of cross-pollination there.
Very interesting. Thank you, Sachin. So just to kind of reiterate, like assigning, you kind of like taking some of the more sales-driven KPIs, as saying some that kind of to the product engineering team, and do also the opposite, where the sales also measured on how well they are team players and similar. It's kind of like a suggestion.
Yeah.
I heard that. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think what Vic said before earlier, just getting the teams to know each other and work together is key as well. Because I know, like, I worked in a place where there were 12 products that we could sell, and there were 12 product managers that we had to bring in to our sales conversations. And to give a good client experience, you had to get to know that person really well to have a good to kind of put up a good front in those client interactions, where you can show the depth and a cohesive team between sales and engineering and things like that. So it can actually work in your favor, that the introducing more people into the sales conversation, which might seem like a no-no for most salespeople, that they want to control the experience that the client gets, but showing that depth and the skill and the vision of the company through what the product team has to say can actually pull those deals along to the finish line. Yeah,
I have a lot of experience, including within my own business. As soon as if you bring in a very strong engineer into any sales conversation, that gives trust and also beliefs in the product and the services you sell, and that's clearly has an impact in the sales flow, as opposed to just talking with the salesperson, which obviously wants to sell you something. So
can I just jump in there? I think we have to differentiate also what kind of sales is, right? So if you're not talking, if I say, and I'm not saying every startup just has a transactional sales, but you might have a small product, you're just trying to get to market, you're trying to find, product market fit, then salespeople are obviously very eager to just go out and sell, and prove themselves. But if we're talking more enterprise sales and something like, I think that's where you were alluding to, right? It is a team game, right? You, as a sales, as if I say experienced AE, right? You usually, if you're selling, multi-million-pound deals, you do have a sales engineer, by the name engineer, right? Usually coming from the engineering team, a technical person with you, and it's always a team effort, right? So there's product marketing involved, there's marketing involved, there's, all sorts of people involved, whether it's product or engineering. As a salesperson, to be honest, it's just labor, right? You want to get people that can help you to get the deal over the line. And a salesperson should recognize that, without that support, they don't get it over the line, and that they can only sell things that can then actually be delivered by it being a team sport. So Ian Koniak has done a lot of work around that, having worked for Salesforce, and closed multi-million-dollar deals, right? So big deals. So I think we need to differentiate here as well, right? Because if you have a more transactional product, you have more likely, if I say a rogue, in quotation mark rogue, maybe junior salesperson, particularly in startups where they can't afford the experience or don't want to bring in a fractional, flying off leg here. So yeah, someone with experience, and they don't want to ask for help, right? They don't want to talk to product. And to coming back to your stats, Carl, right? They're going to go out there and go like, oh yeah, I totally understand what the client wants, right? Of course, and then they go back and they just sell it, right? They take the commission and off they go. And of course, that's not going to work in the long term, right?
That goes back a bit, I think, on Sachin's point as to like, if you only judge and your kind of bonus or whatever is just on the revenue you generate, then that might be your behavior. And similarly, if you want to have a team structure that helps with the sales, if nobody's remunerated around the sales, but just a salesperson, that it's not very motivational for the remaining part of the team. Maybe just a quick one. I see a question coming up in the chat. So Tony is asking just how real do you think that CSAT is and the impact it has in product sales and services? I've been in an organization before where CSAT is more of an exercise to complete and tick box exercises rather than influencing future product sales service strategy to drive improvement. Anyone fancy answering that? Maybe could you, Tony, if you don't mind elaborating, or if somebody wants to jump in, please do so.
I mean,
sorry, Charlie. So yeah, so I think fortunately for you guys, my camera isn't working today, so you don't get to see me in person, but I am here. No, so in my previous company, we had sort of CSAT surveys that went out, and they were obviously targeted to people that were going to give a thumbs up to you and the account team, rather than giving a true representation. So it's very much fudged, but it's still maybe a measure that some companies will use in addition to sales, to service revenues, to product success, to product usage, and so forth. But yeah, I'm just keen to understand whether you think CSAT is well, it's not as important as sales and users and real feedback, versus I suppose CSAT, which is a bit more fudged results.
Maybe first question: who's responsible for is it sales? Is it the product? It's like who's owning?
That's how you see the data, though. I think because CSAT is data, right? And so if you're looking at it from a product perspective, you want to get lots of sources of data. So you'll be running analytics, you'll be doing user interviews, and you do CSAT. Take CSAT as an input. And really, what you need to judge is this a useful way to prioritize my backlog? And it's going to be industry dependent, and it's going to be something that you use as part of a collaborative discussion with sales, with engineering, with CEO, whoever. So, I mean, I suppose the short answer is it really depends. But what I think healthy organizations do is that they have mechanisms for capturing insights, of which customer satisfaction is one, putting it all together in a place where you can do some sort of scoring, so that then you can say, okay, this presents a revenue opportunity, this presents a risk mitigation opportunity, this presents a satisfaction opportunity, this counts for customer growth, this counts for increasing the value of new contracts and so forth. So I think it's a feeder into prioritization, and really you should be having a sensible conversation as with colleagues about is this one that we're going to weigh more heavily or have as a kind of a lower impact score. But yeah, really industry dependent from my perspective.
No, I completely agree, Charlie. I think also it depends on who the owner is of the CSAT or customer satisfaction survey or questionnaire. I think what it's failed in my previous organization is it was more of a marketing exercise rather than a product or rather than a sales. So it's kind of asking quite fluffy questions that were quite wordy in terms of response. And people can't be bothered typing out lots of words.
Yeah,
So you get very blasé responses.
yeah, and I think actually, I mean, one of the things I talk to my teams about is I don't know if all of you will remember the game Doom, but well, when I played Doom for the first time, it's got like different difficulty levels, and one of them is called Hurt Me Plenty. And I talked to my team about setting things that hurt me plenty, because I don't want people to come to me and just tell me what I want to hear. Just say, product's wonderful, your processes are wonderful, it's all great. Actually, I want to hear the negative feedback. I want to see the rage clicking or the frustrations, because actually that's where, maybe it's not something I'm going to deal with straight away because I've got other commitments to deliver new features or products, whatever. But I need to know about it so that it can be appropriately prioritized. And so, yeah, I mean, if you're getting untrustworthy insights for your prioritization, either you've got to say, well, actually, I'm just going to score this low, or you've got to say, it's not a hurt me plenty situation and I need to fix that. That's how I would address it. But I see Dan's got an opinion as well, so over to you, Dan.
Yeah, because I completely agree, Charlie. Unsurprisingly, that CSATs and other scoring KPIs are answers. What's the question? And that's almost always I see people reaching for answers that are familiar, like let's get an NPS score, and they're running to things that and it's not bad. Collecting that data is not bad, and collecting feedback is actually really, really good. But why? What are you doing with this? If you don't start with the question, so the saying is, the right answer to the wrong question is always more harmful than the wrong answer to the right question, because you will spend your time with this, knowing I've got this. We know the CSAT score is this, and that's why it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy of we've made the CSAT really good. Great, our customer's happy. Well, we don't know. The CSAT's really good, or even worse, yes, the CSAT's really good. So well, that's not the point. The point is to make the customers happy, and CSAT is a way of measuring and giving you an indication of whether some of your customers are unhappy. Some of your customers won't leave a review. Some of your customers won't give you feedback in the ways that you're expecting, and they're the ones you need to get through to. So if you start with the question of what are we trying to achieve, then the answer will usually become quite apparent, and you can look, and it's not just about CSAT scores, it's not just about NPS, it's not just about feedback, it's about, do you understand who your customer is and the experience they're going through, and are you fooling yourself and drinking your own Kool-Aid, or actually is there a perspective you're missing, and then does it matter? You might not care that the customers that are rating you down constantly might not actually be the customers you're targeting. If they're not inside of your ICP, you don't actually care. So is your ICP actually exclusively the ones that are doing the CSAT? Because then that's what matters. But again, back to the question. Why do you want this data, and what do you want to do with it? Because data is both a shield and a sword. Well.
Yeah, I just really wanted to agree with you and say that there is this kind of anti-pattern that can sometimes arise of sort of ambulance chasing CSAT and NPS that I've seen in organizations where people are constantly looking at the time series, why has it gone down? It must have been something we did. Why did it go up? And you can end up spending a lot of time on cycles trying to chase the reason for that, which I don't think is so productive. So I think my view on CSAT is that it's one amongst many metrics that you want to be tracking, but don't over-index on it, would be my advice.
And just to kind of expand on that, I think you've also got to think about how you're sampling. So are you direct sampling or indirect sampling? Because there's that thing about focus groups, and others will know this kind of anecdote better than me, but focus groups will tell you what you want to hear, or will give you quite a biased view. But actually, if you watch how people behave within your application, you may get a totally different story. So you've got to be really careful, because you'll bias them by the questions you ask, or who you choose to answer the questions, or the number of people who answer the questions. Either it's going to be, you look at Google reviews, for example, it's always biased towards either people who are delighted whether they've been paid to be or not, or it's going to be people who've had an awful time and want to get their revenge. So you've got to think really carefully about how you're sampling and what biases may be revealed by that.
I'm curious to hear if anyone, just from a sales perspective, because the comments here has been very much on the product and kind of prioritizing and listening or not to customers. Like maybe Volker, Session, any comments on taking, you know, NPS scoring and similar to kind of drive sales efforts?
I can chip in. I mean, I think it does depend on the number of customers that you have and the value of each of those customers. Like, are we talking, you know, a few dozen customers that each spend hundreds of thousands or more, or are you talking, you know, thousands of customers who spend less? And that kind of, I guess, dictates your ability to reach them and how to engage with them. But you know, on the smaller scale of things, I think the survey might be too late and too reactive. You know, a good salesperson will hopefully sign a client, and then in their honeymoon period, 3, 6, up to 12 months down the line, keep checking in on them. And if their client is happy, then they'll ask for referrals and try and get more business off of that happy customer and say, hey, you know, tell me, would you recommend this to your friends? Give me some ideas. Who should I approach? Or can you make some introductions? So that kind of satisfaction should be more, I think it should be more qualitative, more interactive, and the survey might be too reactive. I think the other angle to the conversation around satisfaction and, you know, what value clients might be getting from it, I think that with the way software is deployed now, you could, you know, even before your customers tell you if they're happy or not, just by the usage stats of which features and how often they're using the software, you'll get a gauge of, you know, are they using the software as you intended, as often as you intended, as widely as you intended. And I think there's data to explore there that will give you almost a more real-time insight into what's going on.
Yeah, I think from a CSAT and NPS score, I would agree with, I don't remember who said it, but it's more of a marketing tool, right? I think sales doesn't do too much with it, unless what Sachin says, right, to upsell. I think more interesting, from my opinion, but, you know, product tech people go ahead and take me apart here, but, you know, I think it's more interesting to do QBRs with clients, right? And look at the client satisfaction from that point of view to get this real-time feedback, as Sachin says, right? Like, which features are they using? How do they like the product? Rather than just putting it, if I say, into an online survey, which they fill out once a year as a marketing exercise. I think having this, coming back to communication, the communication with the client is much more important than getting that feedback.
Thank you, Volker. So we're kind of touching a bit on, like, okay, product and satisfaction, customers, and maybe we can look at how do we like allocate resources onto, like again, from some of the research discussion we had previously, a sales cycle is much shorter than, let's say, product definition and innovation. Like, how do you make sure you can drive some of the product in order to achieve sales targets versus ensuring you build something for the long run? Again, going at with some stats that I kind of took out from the internet, 50% of engineering time is spent on sales support, and 72% of engineers report frequent interruption from sales requests. It does have an impact on engineering capabilities. Any suggestion, thoughts around, like, getting, let's say, the product roadmap aligned to what sales need, but also the product requirement for kind of long-term goals?
I don't mind taking this first, because it's a hard one, right? It's, again, it comes down to, what do we build? And the answer is whatever the right thing is for the company, not the customer. And your customers mean you have a viable company, but not necessarily is what a customer wants what the company needs in order to survive. You can go and hack and slash away at your app to fill a particular customer need, or maybe take it in a direction that the wider customer base that you're trying to achieve doesn't exist. Now, if your customers are telling you they want something different to what you deliver, I'm not saying ignore them. That very much is a thing you should be listening to, because you might not be targeting your mole. And that means that you need to change your ICP, not change your product. And what you then need to change to meet your ICP might change. But you do need to resist the temptation to be an outsourcing engineering outfit to build a bespoke product to meet the needs of an individual customer, because that's not what they're paying you to do. In fact, if that's what you become, you'll become very expensive compared to all the Indian outsourcers and other options that you have to build that particular product. So be very clear in what you're delivering, be very clear in who you're delivering it to, and where you get pushed one way or another. Take that as feedback, because that's really important to listen to, but don't let that do anything other than inform your decisions rather than make your decisions for you.
And yeah, to expand on that, I think I suppose you could see two different kinds of capacity within a team. So we have kind of strategic planned capacity where we have, we just finished our quarterly planning. We've got 3 months of stuff that we want to deliver. But baked into that then is some kind of burst agile sales responsive capacity, where we can say, okay, as long as this is something that we actually want to do and it makes sense, and if it gets a client over the line who we want to convert, then we'll invest that capacity there. So, I mean, I think there's a risk that unless you are, sufficiently disciplined and deliberate, that you're going to be, carried by the waves of sales. So I think just getting that balance right and thinking ahead and planning capacity in that way can provide a defense, because what you want to do is you want to move the product forward in line with your vision as well as get clients over the line. So yeah, I think being deliberate and disciplined really makes a difference.
Thank you, Julie. I like the idea of having engineering team like that they kind of spun up just for sales effort, working together in order to achieve a specific goal rather than it being a burden to the actual engineering team, and that creates more tension. It's like it's not necessarily something that you would see all the time, but there's something you've seen in some places. Mal, you have there's one question as well. Just putting it out there.
Okay. I was just going to add. I think that there's a broader question here around allocation. So where do you put engineering resources? What I've seen is different approaches in bigger companies and smaller companies. In really big companies, they'll often have some kind of framework that they're using, in order to determine the allocation across activities in general for the whole of engineering that are relatively short-term in nature. So, things that are building towards product releases that will go out in the next quarter, and then activities that involve product releases in the next quarter or the quarter after that. And you might use a framework like the 3 horizons model to look at how you allocate in the broad across a large engineering team where you put people. And it's not often as kind of scientific, if you like, as that in smaller companies. It might just be more reactive. So I think just anticipating, how would you go about doing this? It does depend on the organization that you're in. And obviously, if you're a SaaS business, I should have made this a bit clearer. Direct to consumer businesses, they have different mechanisms as well. You might use product experimentation and data from that to drive priorities, which will not necessarily be the case in a SaaS business, where you're more driven by what the individual customers that you're working with will want. So the question of allocation is quite a complex one, as Dan was pointing out. How you actually go about doing this is very context dependent, is really the point I was trying to make.
Thank you, Matt. We have 2 questions, and then I'll just voice them so you can also potentially add them to your comment, Charlie. But in the chat, we have how often sales of a promised customers, which has direct impact on engineering team. Is it very common? And probably the answer is yes, it's pretty common. And the second question, how do we make sure that tech innovation align with product and sales, or vice versa, including funding for innovations? Charlie, you had your hands up, so you can.
Yeah. So, I mean, I suppose what I was going to say isn't going to directly address those questions, but what I found is if you spend a lot of time as a product and engineering team filling in the gaps in your product, there's probably some work that needed to be done before you went into your current cycle to do really good discovery before you undertook that kind of milestone. So actually what we're doing at Lantern at the moment is looking ahead to the kind of the next quarters. Our product team are investing into discovery, into user research, into design, so that we make sure that when we actually undertake the next quarter's worth of work, that we're really clear about who it's for, why we're doing it, and what the payoff is going to be. And that very much a collaboration between them, sales, and target customers. So yeah, I suppose you've got the warning signs. If you're doing lots of tactical strategic work to support sales, is your main pipeline actually being effective in supporting your commercial ambitions? And do you need to plan more carefully your next quarter? Those are the questions I would ask.
I also like the principle of innovation and product market fit, like exploring as if that's something you should always do. It's kind of on the top.
Yeah, and being an AI company, there's lots of ways that we could do funky things with LLMs that would be very expensive, because data scientists aren't cheap. So actually being really targeted there and saying, this thing has lots of sizzle, but actually does it have real user application value? And going through that process very quickly before you deploy your data scientists onto it at ridiculous rates is fundamentally important. Otherwise, you're just going to burn cash.
So Carl, I'm curious if you have any stats around how often salespeople overpromise.
100.
Very quick fire. It happens all the time. As a salesperson, there's always a fine balance between keeping up with the competition, right? And that there could be a feature, there could be more development, and obviously then balancing it with product. And if you want to close the deal, you sometimes have to overpromise, even just a teensy bit, right? I agree, you should do that in communication and alignment with product and engineering. But how do you define overpromising, and what are the stats? You said you got a few stats, so I'm curious.
But I think you make a point. I remember being told by salespeople, Volker, that you mustn't let them sell the roadmap. You can only sell what's in the box. But I think actually a really good partnership with sales, products, and engineering is, if you trust me to be able to deliver what I promised on time, and you know that there's a lead time for a sale, then we can get the two to line up. And so actually, if there's trust and if there's promises kept on both sides, you can and must sell the roadmap. But I don't know, am I deluded?
No, I would tend to agree. I think that communication has to happen, right? I mean, in my experience, I always loved working closely with product. I mean, I would say that in the panel here now, right? But because you have that alignment, how far you can push the boundaries, right? And then the question is, how do you sell the roadmap to the client, right? Do you sell it as like, oh yeah, we can deliver that tomorrow, or yeah, that might be a custom build, but it's definitely on the roadmap, and yes, we can accelerate that for you, subject to spend, yada yada yada. At least you get the deal over the line.
And it forms part of discovery for product as well, because if the roadmap doesn't sell, then you know that you've got time to pivot. Whereas if you've already built it, then it's too late.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, like, just to add to that, I think maybe hearing you talk, like, it's okay to sell, let's say, the roadmap if you validate that that's what you want to build. The worst thing is to sell the roadmap and realize that's not what you want to build, and suddenly you're kind of stuck with the over-promising. While if you sell the roadmap and that's what you build, that was more like a really good sales effort. And so I think it's like the balancing of the words there. But I'm curious actually, because Dan, you mentioned about taking some of your product engineering sales training. And I think there's also something around taking salespeople into product training or engineering training.
Well,
maybe, yeah.
I think there's on the previous point, I think it's worth stepping back and working out what we're selling. We're selling expectation, and sales is expectation management. When you sell the roadmap, you're selling a future expectation that a thing will be delivered, and you're potentially disappointing customers if there's a delta between what they actually get and what they bought. Whenever someone is, and that's what we would call over-promising, right? Is that I set an expectation of what I think you're going to get in return for your money, and I'm giving you this thing. And the impact of that is something that you really need to be aware of, because they might be building stuff or making decisions or not doing other stuff on the anticipation that in 2 weeks' time, 6 weeks, month time, or whenever that comes, that it arrives. And if it doesn't, that can actually hurt them. And when they give you a bad, scathing review, it rarely is because you didn't live up to your expectation. The problem is that they are left in the lurch not able to do a thing that you left them thinking they could. And that might be a significant impact because now they can't, they were going to switch off from their heavy IBM license onto you. Now they have to renew. And it's going to cost them an extra $1 million. That impact is what they're really pissed off about. And that's what overselling really hurts. So when it comes to any of this sort of outreach with customers, engagement, sales, basically, it's expectation management. And expectation management isn't always just about the sale. It's about what the aftercare that comes with it, the customer support that you give, and understanding when you are going onto a ledge that you take that step with the customer, because you're putting the customer out there with you. And if that's what happens when you let sales get too far away from product and the reality of what this really means. Yeah, I know what my capability. If you ask me, can I go off and build this Twitter bot with, oh, well, I know exactly in my head how I'd go and build that. Sales have got no idea. If I say, oh, I can probably strap this together with something, or I want to go and learn this new framework and do this new thing, all of these sound like the same. Yeah, so you can do it in 2 weeks, right? My uncertainty and my risk is not translated to them in any way, shape, or form. So they don't really understand what risk we're taking together. And that's the same for when the salesperson makes and I've seen it happen quite a few times, where the salesperson goes, oh, it can't be too hard to do that. I'll just throw that in. Or, oh yeah, we need to also do this. Or I've seen this done elsewhere. So you're just copying what they're doing. So I don't need to sell it twice. When in this case, you know the effort needs to be done twice. And that is all about misalignment. Misalignment and poor expectation management is a recipe for disaster. And all of that can be solved through communication.
I couldn't agree more. I think we talk about, I know obviously it comes from a geeky perspective, we talk about high quality interfaces. And, you know, we're quite big users of product board. And, you know, I talk about insights, and insights is you know, the bread and butter of product board, because actually an insight is could be a sales conversation, it could be you know, customer feedback, it could be whatever it is, and it adds weight to the roadmap. But I think, you know, when we're talking about and that feeds prioritization, I guess. But I think with high quality interfaces, you should be able to tell the sales team from a product perspective, this is what it's going to look like. These are our designs. These are the bits that are subject to change. These are the capabilities that are definitely going to happen. These are the ones that we're working on. It should be abundantly clear when having that selling the roadmap conversation, what actually is guaranteed to be delivered, what's potentially going to be delivered, and then to bring the customer into that conversation. And I think, you know, there are different kinds of customer. Volker could probably fill in better than me on this, but you will have your early adopter customers who are very happy to try things out for you. You're going to have the ones who will only want version 2 once it's been tested on other people. And being really clear on what the relationship is and what their appetite for risk or change or variability is fundamentally important. And that's something that sales have to tell product about, and that product have to recognize, respect, and feed via the sales team as well.
Thank you, Charlie. We just, in terms of timings, we have about 9 minutes left on this call. So, I mean, we can have the time for maybe one kind of topic or share some other insights. Anyone wants to ask questions? And I'm mainly saying that for anyone who wants to ask questions into the chat or just ask anything for the panel. I'll leave the bit of silence there.
I'd be quite keen just to know from the other side, from the sales side, Sachin and Volker, whether you've got any tensions that have come from so whether you see anything from your experience or from the teams you've worked with or companies you've worked with from the sales side that have come from the other side. So obviously we talked a bit about it coming, you know, product seeing tension from sales, selling the roadmap and things. But have you guys seen anything there from the other side? Have you bear in mind we've got a bunch of CTOs on the call, is there anything that you can you could talk to around that at all?
Maybe an example would be to get a product that you couldn't sell, right? So where product or engineering just wouldn't listen to say the client feedback, right? But I mean, to Charlie's point, and I think Dan said it as well, right? It's a communication, right? So if you go out to the client on a daily basis or the prospects, you kind of get a feeling what the market wants, right? So if you feed that back to engineering and they're not listening and they stick to their roadmap, and I've seen that before, and you go like, what the fuck, right? What am I actually doing? Right? There's nothing I can sell because there's no product market fit. The market doesn't want it. A bit like Steve Jobs, right? We're like, oh, I have this product and that's what I'm gonna, I mean, he was right? Fair point to him, but not everyone in product is right without knowing the customer, and it is this link really, right? And that goes both ways, I believe.
Yeah, I'd mirror that. Like, similarly, I've gotten like new release notes on a new version, and you scan it and quickly think, which customers in the pipeline is this going to be interesting to, because you want to get in front of them and get that conversation moving. And when there's not enough there, or the thing that you were expecting isn't there, that definitely creates some frustration coming from the product and engineering side. So just kind of listening to the customers.
Great, thanks, guys.
So that reminds me of I don't know why it just came into my head. Listening to customers, I remember GitHub. I'm sure if people remember this story in the early days when they started off, they were competing against SourceForge, and the main request that came constantly was, we need FTP to be able to upload binaries, and distribute software. And that's what SourceForge is doing. And they were really against it because they had this kind of product vision of solely Git, only Git, always Git type of principle. And then they came up with solving the same problem. So instead of having the solutionizing from the customer saying we need FTP, like what do you actually need it for? I distribute software like our binary that is attached to the source code. And then they came up with the GitHub pages, to do that through Git. And it's kind of like, and that's, I think it's marrying quite well the requirement for customers, the needs with engineer product, and the ability to do it in a different way, which then, of course, I think gives more value because you come up with something new that then redefines you as a business. You have to have a very strong, I guess, identity, mission, vision as to what you represent, what you try to do from product, sales, who you're targeting, etc. And if that's not clear, then I think you go in all directions because you're not really sure who you are and what you're trying to do. But the point, like, I think that communication came up quite a lot as well. I think like that, how do you communicate better between the team is, I'm also curious, like, again, like not just to go back to sales, but Volker, you do coaching of teams, of sales team. Is that something that you bring up as to how do you coach, like when you coach a salesperson, like, do you bring the fact of communicating better with the product team, and how do you bring that back into the sales conversation? Could you maybe just explore that a bit? I mean, I'll give you 4 minutes. So you have 2 minutes.
I mean, yes, generally speaking, I mean, when I work with companies, whether that's in a coaching or advisory, facility, I mean, basically you need to look at the overall picture, right? You need to look at the whole processes, whether it's a communication flow or the process flow. I mean, I think there hasn't been many assignments where I didn't come into a company and go like, okay, when do sales and product have the regular catch up? And they go like, oh, we don't. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't, right? So you're out at front, and product is out and back, and you don't talk to each other. So you often find that in start and scale ups, so yeah, looking at that is super important, particularly when you're coaching sales leaders. Do I hear some sirens or something?
Yeah, that's me. I don't know what it is. Sorry, I'm gonna mute.
It's my...
and it doesn't sound like an ambulance or police. I don't know what type of sirens this is. Anyway.
If we see Carl on fire, we know it's gone bad.
Yeah,
on the Hackney, Carl.
As long as the background stays yellow and doesn't turn red, and you'll be fine. So yeah, super important to look at, 100%.
On the training angle, the other thing I like to do when we bring new salespeople in is to get them, you want them to build a confidence about your purpose, the company's mission, the ideal customer profile, and one of the better ways to do that I found is to get them in front of your happiest customers, so they get the confidence of what we're doing, what value does it bring, and that will kind of give them, that will convey in how they present to potential customers, and not let them be as swayed by feature requests or price negotiations or things like that. That a less confident salesperson may be more likely to be swayed by.
The only other thing I'd inject here is one of the values that I have when I'm building teams is that generally we look to hire low ego teams. So real interest in the problem, real interest in collaboratively working towards solutions, and really good listeners. So part of the challenge is you will get kind of power imbalances between sales and product and engineering if people are kind of either selfishly motivated or wanting to build a fiefdom or whatever it might be. And those from my perspective are red flags, and you're going to have kind of organizational tension, let's say generously. So finding low ego, building low ego teams, working with low ego colleagues, and ensuring that you're being a really good listener. You play back. So what I think you said was this can be a really powerful tool in conversation, because actually it makes the other person listen back to what they said, and it makes sure that you've understood what they said. So finding ways to use those sort of conversational tools and work with the right kinds of people are game changers.
And that's active listening. So every salesperson should have that skill. Should, I say. But yeah, something I train to a lot of people. So if anyone needs that help, let me know.
Carl, I don't think we can hear you. I don't know why. Just while Carl's reconnecting, I will say I've just put a link there. You're all welcome to add your LinkedIn details, connect with everyone. Anyone that's met me knows how passionate I am about trying to get everyone just connected to everyone else. Hugely important in searching for jobs and generally ways you can help each other. So you can connect with all the guests there, and everyone feel free to put your own LinkedIn down there. We've already done the guests on there. So anyone else that wants to just keep that doc, keep it open, you can connect with everyone there. Any feedback as well, if there's any particular threads that you'd like us to continue looking at within this, would love to hear that. If there's been any aha or eureka moments that have come from this, we'd love to hear that as well. Carl, you back on now?
Can you hear me?
I'll give you back to Carl then.
Sirens. Yeah. Thank you, Barry, for that. And also just we'll have the AI chatbot to also like come up with the best insights on the conversation. But yeah, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to you, Barry, for organizing this and all the effort put in there. The panel, fascinating conversation from my end, and like I really enjoyed it. So Charlie, Mal, Dan, Sachin, and Volker, thank you so much. I hope this was useful for people listening, the participation. A massive thank you for everyone, and of course the usual Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I think this is my last meeting of this year, and then I'm going to disconnect and spend some time with my family. So thank you, everyone. If anyone wants to say a last thank you as well, please do so now before we quit the meeting.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. See you in the new year.
See you in the new year. Bye for now.
Bye.